Foal chases a cleaner for hours until she discovers the reason and cries. Emily Parker was cleaning the water buckets when she heard the sound of tiny hooves tapping on the dirt floor behind her. It was the third day in a row this had happened. The chestnut foal followed her everywhere from the moment she arrived at Oak Ridge Farm until it was time to leave. "Go away, Rusty," she murmured, trying to shoo the animal away with her free hand. "I have work to do." The foal, however, stayed right there, watching her every move with those big dark eyes. Emily sighed and continued her task, carrying the heavy buckets toward the main stable. The hooves kept following her. Richard Thompson, the farm owner, appeared in the main hallway just as Emily was struggling to balance 3 buckets at once, with the foal practically glued to her legs. "Emily!" he barked in that rough voice she knew all too well. "What on earth is going on here?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. It's just that Rusty won't stop following me and—" "You're not here to play with the animals," he cut in, adjusting his hat. "You're here to work. If you can't even walk straight, maybe you should find another job." Emily's face burned. She had been working at that farm for 6 months, waking up before 5 in the morning to catch 2 buses and arrive in time to start work at 7. She needed that job more than anything. "It won't happen again, sir." "Better not," Richard said, glaring at the foal. "And get that animal out of here. He should be in the pasture with the others." Emily watched as Richard strode away, his boots clomping on the wooden stable floor. She crouched beside the foal, who immediately nuzzled her hand. "What do you want from me, Rusty?" she whispered. "I can't lose this job because of you." The foal just stared at her, as if understanding every word. Emily had noticed something different in his gaze from the very first day. It wasn't just curiosity or hunger. It was something deeper, almost desperate. She tried to lead the foal back to the pasture, but he refused to leave her side. Every time she walked away, he came trotting after her, whinnying softly. The other workers began to notice and comment. "That critter's got a spell on you," said Kevin, the farm's vet, watching the scene. "Never seen anything like it." Emily finished organizing the cleaning supplies and put everything away in the storage room. It was almost 6 in the evening, and she had to hurry to catch the last bus. But when she turned to leave, Rusty was there again, blocking her path. "Please," she begged, glancing around to make sure Richard wasn't nearby. "I have to go." The foal took a few steps back, but didn't move out of the way completely. Emily tried to walk around him, but he moved with her as if they were dancing. That's when she noticed something strange. The foal was trembling, not from the cold. The evening was warm. It was a different kind of shiver, as if he was scared. Emily knelt in the dirt and slowly reached out her hand. Rusty stepped closer and pressed his nose into her palm. This time, she felt something wet. The foal was crying. "What's wrong with you?" she murmured, running her hand along his neck. The sound of an engine made her jump up. It was Richard's truck approaching. Emily gave the foal a quick pat and ran toward the farm gate, hearing the hooves trying to follow her once more. The whole way home, she couldn't shake the image of the foal's eyes from her mind. There was something there she didn't understand, but it moved her deeply. Emily lived in a small house at the back of her Aunt Margaret's property in the Riverside Heights neighborhood. It was just 2 small rooms, but it was all she could afford on her cleaning salary. Her aunt was watering the backyard plants when she arrived. "You're late today," observed Margaret, a 68-year-old woman with graying hair always tied in a bun. "I had some trouble at work," Emily said, tossing her bag onto the old living room sofa. "What kind of trouble?" Emily told her about the colt that kept following her and how Mr. Richard had gotten upset. Margaret listened quietly, nodding occasionally. "Animals sense things we don't understand," her aunt finally said. "My grandmother always said that." "But I can't lose this job, Auntie. It's the best I've found since moving here." Margaret stepped closer and placed a hand on her niece's shoulder. "You've been through worse, girl. You'll figure it out." Emily nodded, but inside she felt a growing unease. She had left her hometown a year ago after her life turned upside down. Oak Ridge Farm represented a fresh start, a chance to build something new far from the past that haunted her. The next morning she arrived at the farm determined to keep her distance from the colt, But as soon as she passed through the main gate, there he was, waiting under a tree near the stable. "No," she said aloud, pointing at the animal. "Today you stay away from me." Rusty tilted his head as if trying to understand. Emily grabbed her cleaning supplies and headed to the other side of the property where the agricultural equipment sheds were. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. For 2 hours, Emily worked in peace. She cleaned 3 sheds, organized tools, and even had time to sweep the outdoor area. She was beginning to think her strategy had worked when she heard a loud whinny from the direction of the main stable. She stopped what she was doing and listened. The sound repeated, louder and more desperate. Other horses began whinnying too, creating a chorus of agitation that echoed across the farm. Emily dropped the broom and ran toward the noise. When she reached the stable, the sight took her breath away. Rusty was rearing up on his hind legs, whinnying desperately while 2 workers struggled to hold him with ropes. "He's been out of control since you disappeared," shouted Jack, one of the farmhands. "Won't settle down." "This is ridiculous," Emily said, but something inside her tightened at the animal's distress. "Mr. Richard ordered him locked in the stall until you showed up," the other worker explained, sweating from the effort of restraining the colt. Emily stepped forward slowly. The moment Rusty saw her, he stopped thrashing and bolted toward her, nearly knocking over the men holding him. "Easy," she murmured, holding out her hands. "I'm here." The colt calmed instantly, nuzzling her hands and breathing heavily. The workers exchanged glances, clearly baffled by what they'd just witnessed. "What the hell is going on here?" Mr. Richards' voice cut through the air like a blade. Emily turned and saw him striding over, his face red with anger. Behind him was Kevin, the vet, carrying a medical bag. "Explain this," Richard demanded, pointing at the now perfectly calm colt beside Emily. "I don't know, sir. He just—" "You don't know," he interrupted. "A cleaner who doesn't know why a $15,000 animal is obsessed with her?" Emily swallowed hard. She had no idea the colt was worth that much money. "Kevin," called Richard, turning to the veterinarian, "examine this animal. I want to know if it's sick or if someone gave it something." "I didn't do anything," Emily protested. "We'll see," said Richard, crossing his arms. Kevin approached cautiously, but the moment he tried to touch Rusty, the animal backed away and positioned itself behind Emily, using her as a shield. "Interesting," murmured the vet. "I've seen horses bond with specific people, but never this intensely with a foal so young." "How many months old is he?" asked Emily, unable to contain her curiosity. 4 months, replied Kevin. "He should still be with his mother, but she had complications during birth and—" "Enough," Richard cut in. "Emily, you're dismissed for the rest of the day. Tomorrow we'll talk about your future here." Emily's stomach dropped. She knew exactly what that meant. She grabbed her bag and headed for the gate, trying not to look back. But Rusty's desperate whinnies followed her all the way. That night, Emily barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the foal's desperate gaze. There was something in those eyes she recognized, something familiar and painful. The next morning she arrived at the farm earlier than usual. She wanted to talk to Richard before he made a final decision about firing her. But as she passed the stable, she heard raised voices coming from his office. "This is ridiculous, Kevin," Richard was saying. "I'm not keeping an employee just because an animal is acting up." "But you saw what happened yesterday," the vet's voice replied. "Rusty only calms down around her, and since his mare passed, he hasn't been eating properly." Emily hid behind a stack of hay, trying to listen more closely. "That foal is worth a lot of money," Kevin continued. "He's the son of Sunbeam, one of the best stallions in the state. If he gets sick or stops developing, you'll face a huge loss. And you think the solution is keeping a cleaner because of a spoiled horse? I'm saying it might be worth understanding what's going on before making a rash decision." Emily heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, pretending she was just passing by. When Richard stepped out of the office, she seized the moment to approach him. "Sir, can I talk to you?" Richard sighed and looked at her impatiently. "Make it quick." I know the situation with Rusty is strange, but I swear I didn't do anything to cause it. I need this job, sir. Maybe I can figure out what's happening and fix it. How? Emily didn't have an answer. She just knew she couldn't lose this job. Give me a few more days. If I can't fix it, I'll leave without causing trouble. Richard was silent for a long moment, looking toward the stable where Rusty could be seen pacing nervously in his stall. 3 days, he finally said. You have 3 days to sort this out, but I don't want that animal disrupting the farm's work. Emily nodded quickly and hurried off to start her tasks, but all day as she cleaned and organized, her mind raced, trying to understand Rusty's behavior. At lunch, she sought out Jack, the farm's most experienced ranch hand. Jack, did you know Rusty's mother? Of course, he said, taking off his hat to scratch his head. Star was a beautiful mare, very gentle, very affectionate. What exactly happened to her? Jack glanced around to make sure no one was listening. It was a real sad thing, he said quietly. She had complications during birth. Kevin tried everything, but she didn't make it. Rusty was orphaned when he was just a few weeks old. Who took care of him after? At first, Kevin tried to get him to accept another mare as an adoptive mother, but it didn't work, so he had to be bottle-fed. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. An orphaned foal, motherless, raised by humans. Maybe that's what she saw in those eyes, the same loneliness she knew so well. Who used to bottle-feed him? Mostly Kevin. Sometimes Robert or I would help, but it was a tough time. The little one cried a lot, especially at night. Emily finished her lunch in silence, processing the information. When she returned to work, she decided to try a different approach. Instead of avoiding Rusty, she would try to understand what he wanted. The foal was in the small pasture next to the stable when she approached. As soon as he saw her, he came running, but this time, Emily didn't try to push him away. "Hi, Rusty," she said softly, crouching near the fence. "You miss your mum, don't you?" The animal moved closer and nuzzled her outstretched hand. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. There was something in that gesture that touched an old wound in her heart. "I lost my mum when I was little too," she whispered. "I know how it feels to be alone in the world." Rusty tilted his head, as if really listening. Emily ran her hand along his neck, feeling his soft coat and warmth. "But you can't keep following me like this," she continued. "You'll get me fired, and I can't let that happen." Just then, she heard footsteps behind her. It was Kevin carrying a bucket of feed. "Can I come closer?" he asked. Emily nodded and stepped aside. Kevin poured the feed into the trough, but Rusty didn't even glance at the food. His eyes stayed fixed on Emily. "He hasn't been eating well since he got fixated on you," Kevin said, worried. "It's not fixation," Emily replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "He's scared." "Scared of what?" "Of being abandoned again." Kevin looked at her curiously. "Do you have experience with horses?" "No," she admitted, "but I have experience with abandonment." The two fell silent for a moment, watching Rusty, who still ignored the food in favor of staying near Emily. "Maybe you could try feeding him," Kevin suggested. "He might take it from you." Emily scooped a handful of feed and held it out. Rusty approached slowly and began eating from her palm. It was the first time in days he'd shown interest in food. "Interesting," Kevin murmured. "Very interesting indeed." That afternoon, Emily managed to convince Rusty to stay in the pasture while she finished her work. She promised to return the next day, and somehow the animal seemed to understand. But when she got home, she found a scene that made her world collapse all over again. Her Aunt Margaret was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her, her face red from crying. "What happened, Auntie?" "A notice came today," Margaret said, her voice choked. "I have 60 days to pay the debts or lose the house." Emily's legs went weak. That house was all they had. If they lost it, they'd be out on the street. "How much?" $12,000, Margaret whispered. The amount was astronomical for them. Emily's salary barely covered basic expenses, and her aunt only had a small pension. "We'll figure it out," Emily said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I'll find a way to get extra money somehow." How, dear? You already work from sunup to sundown. Emily had no answer. She went up to her tiny room and collapsed onto the bed, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. First the issue with Rusty threatening her job, now this. Then a crazy idea began forming in her mind. Richard Thompson had said that Rusty was worth $15,000. If she could prove that she was essential to the animal's well-being, maybe she could negotiate some kind of extra payment or bonus. It was a long shot, but it was the only hope she had. The next day, Emily arrived at the farm with a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. She was going to solve the problem with Rusty once and for all, not just to keep her job, but to find a way to help her aunt. But when she reached the stable, she noticed unusual activity. An unfamiliar pickup truck was parked in front of the office, and raised voices came from inside. Emily approached slowly and overheard part of the conversation through the open window. "The animal isn't developing properly," said a male voice she didn't recognize. "If this continues, its value will drop significantly." "I know that," Richard replied, clearly irritated, "but I'm handling the situation." "Handling it how? By keeping a cleaner as a horse nanny?" Emily's face burned. Someone had obviously told them about her situation with Rusty. "Dr. Mitchell," Kevin's voice interjected, "the foal's behavior changed drastically after losing its mother. Maybe we just need more time to—" "Time is money," Dr. Mitchell cut in. "Richard, you have two options. Fix this problem quickly or I withdraw my offer to buy." Emily froze. Someone wanted to buy Rusty. Her heart raced at the thought of the foal being taken away, separated from everything it knew. "What kind of solution are you suggesting?" Richard asked. "Separate the animal from this employee completely. If necessary, fire her. Horses adapt. It might take a few weeks, but he'll forget." "And if he stops eating altogether?" "Then we sell him for slaughter," Dr. Mitchell said coldly. "A horse that's no good for breeding or competition isn't worth the investment." Emily had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. The cruelty of those words hit her like a punch to the gut. Rusty wasn't just a valuable animal. He was a living being who had lost his mother and was desperately trying to find someone to trust. She heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly stepped away, pretending to be working when the men came out of the office. Dr. Mitchell was a tall, well-dressed man in expensive clothes, with an arrogant way of looking at everything around him. He didn't even notice Emily as he walked toward the stable, loudly discussing business strategies and market values. Richard and Kevin followed him, and Emily took the chance to hide behind a stack of hay where she could watch unseen. "Show me the animal," Dr. Mitchell said. They went to Rusty's stall. The foal, who had been calm until then, grew visibly agitated when he saw the stranger approaching. "He's smaller than I expected," Dr. Mitchell observed, looking at Rusty as if he were an object. "And very skittish." "It's because of the situation with the employee," Richard explained. "Once we resolve that—" "Where is she?" Dr. Mitchell interrupted. "I want to see how the animal reacts." Emily panicked. She didn't want to be put on display like some experiment. But before she could hide further, Kevin spotted her. "Emily," he called, "can you come here for a moment?" There was no escaping. Emily walked over slowly, feeling Dr. Mitchell's eyes scanning her up and down with disdain. "Is this the employee?" he asked, as if she weren't even there. "Yes," Richard replied. Dr. Mitchell turned to Emily with a fake smile. "So you're the famous horse whisperer," he said sarcastically. "Let's see this magic in action." Emily looked at Rusty, who was restless in his stall, whinnying softly. The moment he saw her, he calmed down and came toward her. "Impressive," murmured Dr. Mitchell, but his tone held no admiration. "And you have no training with horses?" "No, sir." "Then it's just luck," he said, turning to Richard. "I'll be blunt. Either you fix this situation in 48 hours, or my purchase offer drops by half. A dependent horse like this is useless for my purposes." "What purposes are those?" Emily asked, unable to hold back. Dr. Mitchell looked at her as if she were a bothersome insect. "Competitions," he said flatly. "A competition horse can't have emotional weaknesses." "He's just a foal," Emily protested. "He's still learning to live without his mother." "Exactly the problem," Dr. Mitchell retorted. He should have been emotionally weaned long ago. Emily felt anger rise in her chest. The man spoke about Rusty as if he were a faulty machine. Maybe he needs more time and affection, not forced separation, she said, completely forgetting she was talking to a potential buyer. Affection? Dr. Mitchell laughed. Ma'am, you clearly know nothing about raising competition horses. Emotions are weaknesses that must be eliminated. And you clearly know nothing about an animal's heart, Emily shot back. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard was red with anger, Kevin looked stunned, and Dr. Mitchell stared at Emily as if she were an alien creature. Richard, Dr. Mitchell said slowly, either you control your employee and fix this, or our deal is off. I don't work with amateurs. He stomped away, leaving a trail of tension behind. Richard turned to Emily with an expression she'd never seen before. Congratulations, he said, his voice dangerously low. You just cost me $15,000. Sir, Not another word, he cut in. You're fired. I want you off my property in an hour. Emily felt the world spin around her. In minutes, she'd lost her job and destroyed any chance to earn money to help her aunt. Please, she begged. I can fix this. I can get Rusty to— 1 hour, Richard repeated, walking away. Emily stood frozen, tears burning her eyes. Kevin approached and placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, he said softly. You didn't deserve that. What about Rusty? What'll happen to him? Kevin sighed. Richard will try to find another buyer, but if he can't, well, you heard what Dr. Mitchell said. The word slaughter echoed in Emily's mind like a scream of horror. She looked at the stall where Rusty watched her with those big, trusting eyes, unaware his world was about to crumble again. Can I say goodbye to him? Kevin glanced around to ensure Richard was gone, then nodded. Emily approached the stall and reached out. Rusty came to her immediately, nuzzling her palm as he always did. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I tried to protect you, but I only made things worse. The foal seemed to sense her sadness. He pressed his muzzle against her cheek, a gesture she'd seen him make only a few times before. You have to be strong, she continued, running her hand along his neck. You have to learn to trust others, even if I'm not here. Rusty let out a soft whinny, a sound that shattered Emily's heart. I love you too, she said, kissing his velvety muzzle. But now you have to grow up and be brave. She pulled away quickly before she completely lost control. Kevin followed her to the storage shed, where she kept her things. Emily, he said as she gathered her belongings, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did Rusty bond so strongly with you? I've seen horses grow attached to specific people, but never with this intensity. Emily stopped putting away her things and looked at him. I think we recognize something in each other, she finally said. Loneliness, maybe. The feeling of not belonging anywhere. Do you feel that way? Emily nodded, not trusting her own voice to answer. Where did you live before coming here? New York City, she said, but it didn't work out. I lost my job, my apartment, everything. And your family? It's just me and my aunt now. My parents passed when I was 8. My aunt raised me, but she's struggling financially and— Emily stopped talking, realizing she was sharing more than she intended. But there was something about Kevin's gentle manner that made her feel safe. I'm sorry, he said. Life hasn't been easy for you. I'm not asking for pity, Emily said quickly. I just want someone to understand that Rusty isn't just an expensive animal. He's a living being who's suffering. I understand, Kevin replied, and I'll do everything I can to protect him. Emily finished gathering her things and walked toward the farm gate. Each step was torture, especially when she heard Rusty's desperate whinnies echoing behind her. She didn't look back. The walk to the bus stop had never felt so long. She sat on the worn wooden bench and finally let the tears fall. It wasn't just losing the job that devastated her, but the feeling of failing Rusty the same way she'd failed so many other things in her life. The bus took 40 minutes to arrive, and the whole time she kept thinking about how she'd tell her Aunt Margaret that she'd not only lost her job, but also any chance of getting the money to save their house. When she finally got home, she found Margaret in the backyard, pulling weeds with a fury that clearly had nothing to do with gardening. "How was work?" her aunt asked without looking up. "I got fired," Emily said simply. Margaret stopped what she was doing and looked at her niece. "What happened?" Emily told her everything, about Rusty, Dr. Mitchell, the argument, and the firing. Margaret listened quietly, shaking her head now and then. "You did the right thing," she finally said. "Did I?" Emily looked at her aunt in surprise. "I lost our only way to get the money to save the house." "My dear," Margaret said, wiping her hands on her apron, "I've lived a long time in this world, and one thing I've learned is that money can always be found another way. But the ability to do what's right, even when it costs you, that's priceless. But what about the house? We'll figure it out, we always have." That night, Emily barely slept. She lay in bed thinking about Rusty, wondering how he was feeling with her sudden absence. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep and went to the kitchen to make tea. Margaret was already there, sitting at the table with a cup of chamomile. "Couldn't sleep either?" her aunt asked. "I keep thinking about Rusty," Emily admitted. "Do you think he understands I didn't choose to leave him?" "Animals understand more than we realize," Margaret said. "My grandmother always said they feel things with their hearts, not their minds. I'm worried about what will happen to him." "You did all you could, sweetheart. Sometimes we plant seeds that only bear fruit much later." The next morning, Emily started job hunting. She visited stores, restaurants, family homes, anywhere that might need help. But the economic downturn had hit the small town hard, and openings were scarce. By the end of the 3rd day, she returned home discouraged and empty-handed. Margaret was waiting with a strange look on her face. "Someone was here looking for you," she said. "Who?" "Kevin, the ranch veterinarian." Emily's heart raced. "What did he want? Is it about Rusty?" "He didn't say much. Just asked you to call him as soon as you got back." Emily dialed the number Margaret had written down with trembling hands. "Hello, Kevin." "Emily, I'm so glad you called. I need to talk to you urgently." "Is it about Rusty? Is he okay?" "No, he's not," Kevin said, his voice serious. "He hasn't eaten in 3 days, barely drinks water, and today I found something that might change everything." "What did you find?" "I can't talk about it over the phone. Can you meet me downtown tonight, at the main square?" "Of course, but..." "At 8 o'clock, and Emily, bring your aunt too. I think she'll want to hear this." The call ended, leaving Emily with more questions than answers. What had Kevin discovered? And why did Margaret need to be there? At exactly 8, Emily and Margaret were sitting on a bench in the square when Kevin arrived. He looked uneasy, constantly glancing around as if afraid of being seen. "Thank you for coming," he said, sitting beside them. "What I'm about to tell you might sound impossible, but I swear it's true." "Just say it already," Emily pleaded. "I'm worried sick about Rusty." "I started looking into his history after you left," Kevin began. "I wanted to understand why he bonded with you so strongly. So I tracked down his registration papers, medical records, things like that." "And what did you find?" "His mother, Star, wasn't just any mare. She was rescued from an abuse case 5 years ago." Emily leaned forward, intrigued. "What kind of abuse?" "A rancher in New York City kept several horses in horrible conditions. The police intervened after a tip, and several animals were rescued. Star was one of them." "So what?" Margaret asked. "Here's the interesting part," Kevin said, looking straight at Emily. "The tip came from a ranch employee, a young woman who worked there and risked her job to save those animals." Emily felt something stir in her stomach. "How do you know that?" "Because I found the police report, and the name of the person who made the call is right there. Emily Parker." The world stopped. Emily stared at Kevin, then at Margaret, trying to process what she'd just heard. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I never..." "Did you work at Hope Ranch in New York City 2 years ago?" Kevin asked gently. The memory hit Emily like lightning. Hope Ranch. The place she'd worked before her life fell apart. The place where she'd seen horrors that haunted her for months. "My God," she murmured. I remember the mare. A chestnut. Very sick. Kept in a tiny stall. Star, Kevin confirmed. You saved her life, Emily. And now her son recognizes that in you. Tears streamed down Emily's face. She vaguely remembered that mare, but there had been so many suffering animals there. It was hard to separate the memories. How is this possible? Margaret asked, clearly moved. Horses have incredible olfactory memory, Kevin explained, and they pass information to their offspring in ways we don't fully understand yet. Rusty might recognize Emily's scent as someone linked to his mother's rescue. But I never even touched her, Emily protested. I just made the call. You did more than that, Kevin said, pulling a folder from his car. I spoke to the vet who handled the rescue today. He remembers you, said you insisted on helping with first aid, that you calmed the animals during transport. Emily vaguely remembered that chaotic day. She had been fired on the spot, of course, and her life in New York City had become unbearable after that. But she didn't regret reporting it. There's more, Kevin continued. Star gave birth to Rusty at Richard's farm, but throughout the pregnancy, she showed very strange behavior. Whenever she saw someone in a blue jumpsuit like the one you wore at Hope Ranch, she'd get agitated, as if she were looking for someone. Emily glanced at the blue apron she was still wearing. Do you think she was looking for me? I think she never forgot who saved her, and somehow she passed that on to her son. The three of them fell silent for a long moment, absorbing the weight of that discovery. What does this mean for Rusty now? Emily finally asked. It means his attachment to you isn't just stubbornness or a whim, Kevin said. It's gratitude, it's recognition, it's love. But that doesn't change the fact that Richard fired me and is selling Rusty. Actually, it might, Kevin said with a mysterious smile. Because I haven't told Richard everything yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Why? Because this story could completely change Rusty's value. A colt with an emotional connection like this, the son of a mare rescued by a heroine. That's not just a competition horse, it's a marketing story worth a fortune. Emily was confused. I don't understand. Think of it this way, Kevin explained. Dr. Mitchell only wanted Rusty for competitions, but there are other kinds of buyers, people who'd pay much more for a horse with a powerful emotional story. Equine therapy programs, for example, or collectors who value unique stories. Are you saying Rusty could be worth more because of me? I'm saying the two of you together could be worth more than anyone imagined. Margaret, who had been quiet throughout the explanation, finally spoke. And what do you plan to do with this information? That depends on Emily, Kevin said. I can tell Richard and try to convince him to rehire her, or I can look for other buyers who understand the real value of this story, or what? Or you could buy Rusty. Emily nearly choked. Buy him? With what money? I don't even have a job. With the money you'll earn by telling this story, Kevin said calmly. Newspapers, magazines, TV shows. A story about a woman who saved a mare and then bonded with her orphaned foal. That's worth a lot, Emily. I don't want to exploit Rusty like that. It wouldn't be exploitation, Kevin insisted. It'd be giving him exactly what he needs, a life with someone who truly loves him. Emily looked at Margaret, who nodded slowly. It's a possibility, her aunt said, and it could save the house too. But I don't know how to take care of a horse, Emily protested. I can teach you, Kevin offered. Besides, Rusty doesn't need a horse expert. He needs you. The next morning, Kevin scheduled a meeting with Richard. Emily arrived at the farm for the first time since her firing, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. Rusty spotted her from afar and began whinnying loudly, clearly excited to see her. As she approached the stall, he rushed over and pressed his muzzle against the bars, as if trying to touch her through the metal. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered, reaching out. I missed you too. Emily? Richard's voice made her turn. He was coming from the office with a puzzled expression. What are you doing here? Kevin asked me to come, she explained. He said he found something important about Rusty. What kind of thing? Kevin appeared carrying the same folder from the night before. Richard, sit down. You'll want to be seated for this. For the next 20 minutes, Kevin told the whole story about Star, the rescue, the connection with Emily, everything. Richard listened in silence, his expression shifting from disbelief to understanding. "You're telling me," he finally said, "that my employee saved the mother of my most valuable horse 2 years ago?" "Exactly," Kevin confirmed, "and that Rusty recognizes that in her." "Yes." Richard looked at Emily as if seeing her for the first time. "Why did you never tell me about that farm in New York City?" "Because it didn't end well for me," Emily admitted. "I was fired and ended up losing everything. It's not exactly the kind of reference you want to give for a new job." "But you did the right thing." "Yes," she said simply. "I did." Richard fell silent for a long moment, looking toward the stall where Rusty remained restless, clearly wanting to get out to be near Emily. "Kevin," he finally said, "how much value do you think this story could add to Rusty? It depends on how it's presented, but I'm talking at least double what Dr. Mitchell was offering." "Double?" Richard leaned forward. "Are you sure?" "I am. I made some discreet calls last night. There are very interested people." Emily watched the change in Richard's face. The man who had fired her 3 days earlier now looked at her as if she were made of gold. "Emily," he said, turning to her, "I'd like to offer you your job back." "Under what conditions?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "What do you mean?" "You fired me for defending Rusty. Now you want to rehire me because you've discovered I can be profitable. I want to know the terms." Richard seemed uncomfortable with her bluntness. "Well, you'd return as a cleaner, but you'd also be responsible for specifically caring for Rusty." "No," Emily interrupted. "No? I won't come back as a cleaner. If you want to capitalize on my story with Rusty, then I want to be treated as a professional. I want fair pay, set hours, and I want to be part of any negotiations involving Rusty." Kevin smiled faintly. Richard looked stunned. "You're making demands." "I'm setting conditions," Emily corrected. "Rusty isn't just a product. He's a living being who trusts me. If you want to use our story, you'll have to respect me in the process." "And if I refuse?" "Then Kevin and I will look for other buyers for Rusty, buyers who understand the real value of our connection." The silence that followed was tense. Emily could see Richard weighing his options, calculating losses and profits. "What kind of salary did you have in mind?" he finally asked. "Enough for me to rent a place where I can have Rusty with me," she said, an idea forming in her mind as she spoke. "You want to buy Rusty?" "I want to give him what he really needs. A home where he's loved, not just valued." Richard looked at Kevin, who shrugged. "It's an interesting proposal," the vet said. "Emily would be the best possible owner for Rusty, and the story of a woman who bought the horse whose mother she saved would be even more valuable to the media." "But she doesn't have the money," Richard protested. "Not yet," Kevin said. "But with the media contracts this story could generate, she would." Emily felt her heart race. Could it really be possible? Buying Rusty, having a stable income, saving Aunt Margaret's house. "I'd need an advance," she said, "and guarantees that Rusty would be well cared for while I arrange everything." "What kind of advance?" "Enough to settle my aunt's debts and get a suitable place for Rusty." "That's at least 15,000, Richard calculated. 20,000, Emily corrected. 15 for the debts, 5 to adapt a space for Rusty." "You're out of your mind if you think I'll advance $20,000 to a former cleaning lady," Emily stood up. "Then we have no deal," she said simply. "Kevin, let's find other interested parties." "Hold on," said Richard quickly. "No need to be so hasty." "I'm not being hasty. I'm being realistic. Rusty is worth far more than you realize, and I'm the only one who can unlock that value. But I won't accept crumbs for it." Emily walked to Rusty's stall one last time. "I'll find a way to get you out of here," she whispered to the colt. "I promise." She was almost at the gate when she heard Richard calling her. "Emily, let's talk." She turned but didn't go back. She made him come to her. 10,000 up front, he offered. "And you take responsibility for Rusty until you can buy him. 15,000. And I want a contract guaranteeing my rights to any use of our story. 12. 15. And I won't budge." Richard looked at Kevin, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Fine," he said finally. $15,000 up front. But I want guarantees you'll get the rest of the money. Kevin will help me with media contacts, said Emily, and I'll work hard to make it happen. They shook hands, and Emily felt as if a huge weight had lifted from her shoulders. There was still much work ahead, but at last she could see a future where she and Rusty could stay together. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the weeks that followed, Emily's life changed completely. Kevin introduced her to journalists, TV producers, and even a documentary director interested in telling her and Rusty's story. The first interview was for a local TV program. Emily was nervous, but when she began speaking about her bond with Rusty, the words flowed naturally. It wasn't magic, she explained to the host. It was recognition. Rusty sensed I understood his pain because I'd been abandoned too. And how do you feel being called a hero for saving his mother? I don't feel like a hero, Emily said honestly. I just did what anyone with a heart would do seeing animals suffer. The interview aired Saturday night and sparked an overwhelming response. Kevin's phone didn't stop ringing the following week, with offers from bigger networks, national magazines, and even a film producer interested in the story rights. Emily, Kevin said when they met at the farm the next Monday, you won't believe the offer I got today. What is it? A national network wants to make a full documentary about you and Rusty. They're offering $50,000 for exclusive rights. Emily nearly fell over. $50,000. That's right. It'd be enough to buy Rusty, pay off your aunt's debts, and still leave you a good sum to start a new life. Emily looked at Rusty, grazing peacefully in the paddock. Over the past weeks, since she'd returned to work at the farm, he had transformed. Eating well, playing with the other colts, growing strong and healthy. There's one condition, she said. What? I want editorial control over how our story is told. I won't let them turn it into something sensational or fake. I think we can negotiate that, said Kevin. And I want part of the money to help other at-risk animals. Emily, you don't have to... Yes, I do, she interrupted. If our story is going to make so much money, then it has to serve a greater purpose too. Kevin smiled. Are you sure you were just a cleaner? Because you're negotiating like an executive. Maybe I've always been more than I thought, said Emily. I just needed the right opportunity to find out. The negotiation with the television network took 2 weeks. Emily, with Kevin's help and a lawyer Margaret knew, managed to keep editorial control and allocate 20% of the payment to an animal protection fund. When the contract was finally signed, Emily used part of the money to officially buy Rusty. The ceremony was simple but emotional. Richard handed over the ownership papers at a small gathering on the farm with all the staff present. I never thought I'd see the day when a cleaner would buy my most valuable horse, said Richard, but his tone wasn't scornful. It was genuine admiration. I never thought I'd see the day when I'd own a horse, Emily replied, running her hand along Rusty's neck. What will you do now? Kevin asked. We're going home, said Emily, looking at Rusty. We're starting a new life together. With the remaining money, Emily bought a small property on the outskirts of town. It wasn't big, but it had enough pasture for Rusty and a modest house where she and Margaret could live comfortably. The move happened on a sunny Saturday. Kevin helped transport Rusty in the trailer, and when they arrived at their new home, the colt curiously explored every corner of the land. He likes it, Margaret observed, watching Rusty run freely through the pasture. How can you tell? Emily asked. Look at the way his ears are. My grandmother always said a happy horse has its ears forward. Emily laughed. Over the past few weeks, she'd learned a lot about horses from Kevin, but she was still discovering new things every day. The documentary was filmed over 2 months. The production team followed Emily and Rusty in their new home, documenting not just their past, but also their present together. What does Rusty mean to you now? The director asked during one of the interviews. Emily sat in the pasture, Rusty grazing nearby. He taught me that sometimes the most important people in our lives come when we least expect them, she said, and that true love isn't about possession or control. It's about mutual understanding. Do you think you saved him or he saved you? I think we saved each other, Emily replied, watching Rusty come closer for affection. I saved his mother from suffering, and he saved me from loneliness. The documentary, Hearts Connected, the story of Emily and Rusty, premiered 6 months later on a national network. Emily hosted a small viewing party at home, inviting Kevin, a few neighbors, and of course, her Aunt Margaret. I can't believe I'm seeing you on TV, Margaret said, tears in her eyes. Neither can I, Emily admitted. The show was a success. In the days that followed, Emily received hundreds of messages from people who connected with her story. Many were from those who had also experienced loss and found comfort in animals. One message that moved her deeply came from a 12-year-old girl. Emily, my parents died last year, and now I live with my grandma. She let me adopt a dog from the shelter, and he makes me feel less alone. Thank you for showing that animals understand our pain and help us heal. I think our story really is helping people, Emily said to Kevin, who had come to visit that afternoon. That's exactly what I hoped for, he said. You two are proof that true connections can overcome any obstacle. Emily looked at Rusty, who was now a young and strong horse. He had grown a lot over the past few months, but still had the same sweet, affectionate gaze as when he was an orphaned foal. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't made that report, she said. Don't dwell on that, Kevin advised. What matters is that you did. And you didn't just change Star's life, you changed Rusty's too. And your own. That night, as she did every night, Emily went to say goodnight to Rusty before bed. He always waited for her near the fence, as if he knew she would come. Good night, my love, she said, running her hand along his neck. Thank you for finding me. Rusty nuzzled her cheek, the same tender gesture he had made since they were just a lonely cleaner and an orphaned foal. But now they were family. A year later, Emily received an unexpected call. It was from a national animal protection organization. Emily Parker, said the woman's voice on the other end. This is Sandra Reynolds from Animal Protection America. I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? We'd like to invite you to be our regional ambassador. Your work reporting Hope Ranch and your story with Rusty have inspired many people to get involved in animal protection. Emily's heart raced. What exactly would that mean? You'd travel around the region giving talks, visiting shelters, and helping with awareness campaigns. The salary would be enough to maintain your farm and still live comfortably. What about Rusty? He could join you for many of the activities. Therapy horses are very effective in our educational programs. Emily discussed the offer with Margaret and Kevin. Both encouraged her to accept. It's a chance to make your story serve something even greater, Margaret said. And Rusty was trained for social interaction, Kevin added. He'd love meeting new people and helping other animals. Emily accepted the offer. In the following months, she and Rusty visited dozens of schools, shelters, and farms across the region. Every time Emily told her story, she saw in people's eyes the same transformation she had experienced. The understanding that animals aren't just property, but companions capable of unconditional love. During one talk, a child raised their hand. Aunt Emily, how did you know you had to save Rusty's mom? I didn't know she would be Rusty's mom, Emily answered honestly. I just knew I was seeing suffering and had to do something to stop it. Even though it could cause trouble for you. Even then, because sometimes doing the right thing is more important than our own safety. After the talk, a woman approached Emily. I work at a farm where some animals aren't being treated well, she said quietly, but I'm afraid to report it and lose my job. Emily held the woman's hands. I understand your fear, she said, but think of it this way. If you don't report it, who will? Those animals are counting on someone like you to be their voice. What if it goes wrong? It might at first, Emily admitted. My life turned upside down after I reported Hope Ranch, but look where it led me. Sometimes the ends justify the means, even when the path is hard. The woman nodded and promised to think about it. 2 weeks later, Emily got a call from her. She had made the report, and though she lost her job, animal protection organizations who admired her courage were reaching out to her. Thank you for giving me strength, she told Emily. You showed me that doing the right thing is worth it, even when it's hard." Stories like these became common in Emily's life. Her journey with Rusty had become an inspiration for hundreds of people who found the courage to defend helpless animals. On a quiet Sunday, 2 years after buying Rusty, Emily was in the pasture, watching him play with a new foal that had arrived at the farm the previous week. It was an orphan rescued from abandonment, and Rusty had immediately taken on the role of a protective older brother. "He's learned to care for others," observed Kevin, who had come over for lunch. "He learned from the best teacher," said Margaret, smiling at Emily. "What teacher?" Emily asked. "You," her aunt replied. "He saw how you cared for him when he needed it most, and now he's doing the same for this new foal." Emily felt tears in her eyes. It was true. Rusty had grown into a gentle and protective horse, always willing to help other animals that came to the farm. "I think I've figured out my purpose in life," she said. "What?" Kevin asked. "To be the bridge. Between animals who need help and people who can help. Between suffering and healing." "A living bridge," Margaret said approvingly. "Exactly." That afternoon, Emily received a call that would change her life once again. It was from an international documentary channel. "Emily Parker," said a voice with an American accent. "This is Jennifer Mitchell, executive producer at Wildlife World. We'd like to talk to you about a very special project." "What kind of project?" "A documentary series about people who've dedicated their lives to saving animals. Your story was recommended by several international organizations." Emily felt a flutter in her stomach. "International?" "Yes. The series will air in 15 countries. We're offering $100,000 for the rights to your story and your participation in 5 episodes. Emily nearly dropped the phone. $100,000 was more money than she'd ever dreamed of having. "I'd need to talk to my family," she stammered. "Of course, but there's one condition. We'd like you and Rusty to visit our headquarters in Miami for some additional filming." Emily swallowed hard. Traveling to another country was something she'd never considered. "When would that be?" "In 2 months. All expenses paid, of course." After hanging up, Emily sat down in the pasture, trying to process what had just happened. Rusty walked over and nuzzled her head, as if sensing her excitement. "What do you think, my love?" she asked the horse. "Are we ready for an international adventure?" Rusty let out a soft whinny, and Emily chose to interpret it as a yes. Margaret and Kevin were thrilled by the offer, but also concerned. "It's an incredible opportunity," Kevin said. "But are you sure you want to leave the country and take Rusty with you?" "The offer is for both of us," Emily said. "It wouldn't make sense without him." "It'll be very stressful for a horse to fly," Kevin warned. "Then we'll go by ship," Emily said simply. "No matter how, we'll go together." The trip preparations took 6 weeks. Emily had to get a passport, vaccinate Rusty, and secure all the necessary documentation for international animal transport. It was a complex process, but the American producer helped with all the paperwork. The night before the trip, Emily barely slept. In the morning, she went to say goodbye to Rusty in the temporary stable at the port. "It's going to be an adventure, my love," she said, running her hand along his neck, "but we'll be home in 2 weeks." The sea voyage was smoother than Emily had imagined. Rusty adjusted well to the ship, and she spent the 5-day trip studying English and preparing for interviews. Miami amazed her from the very first moment. The palm trees, the heat, the blue sea, everything was so different from her hometown. But what impressed her most was the welcome at the production company. "Emily," Jennifer Mitchell said, rushing to hug her as she arrived at the studio, "it's an honor to meet you in person." "The pleasure is mine," Emily replied in hesitant English. "Don't worry about the language," Jennifer said in Portuguese. "We have interpreters for everything." The filming lasted a week. Emily told her story dozens of times to different cameras and in different settings. But the most exciting moment was when they brought Rusty to the studio. "We've never had a horse here before," the director said, "but your story wouldn't make sense without him." Rusty behaved perfectly during the shoot. He seemed to understand he was being filmed and posed naturally beside Emily. "He's a natural star," Jennifer remarked. "You two have incredible chemistry on camera." During the final interview, the interviewer asked a question that caught Emily off guard. "Emily, if you could send a message to everyone around the world who will watch this documentary, what would it be?" Emily looked at Rusty, who was grazing peacefully on the studio lawn, then turned back to the camera. "I'd say we all have the power to change a life," she said. "Sometimes we think our small actions don't make a difference, but they do. When I reported Hope Ranch, I thought I was just saving a few horses. I didn't know I was creating a connection that would change my life forever. And what advice would you give to someone hesitating to do the right thing out of fear of the consequences?" "I'd say the consequences of not doing the right thing are always worse than the consequences of doing it. You might lose something in the process, but you always gain something greater, the peace of mind that comes from knowing you did what needed to be done." The trip back home was peaceful. Emily and Rusty arrived on a sunny Thursday, greeted by Margaret and Kevin at the port. "How was it?" her aunt asked, hugging her niece. "Incredible," Emily said, "but I'm happy to be home." Rusty whinnied loudly when he saw the familiar pasture, clearly overjoyed to be back. "I think he missed home too," Kevin observed. In the months that followed, life returned to normal. Emily continued her work as a regional ambassador, traveling around the metropolitan area and helping animal protection organizations. The money from the international documentary allowed her to expand the property and create a small sanctuary for rescued horses. The documentary, Hearts Connected, the story of Emily and Rusty, was broadcast worldwide and won several international awards. Emily received invitations to speak in other countries, but chose to keep her work focused on her local community. "Why don't you accept those international invitations?" Kevin asked during one of his weekly visits. "Because my work is here," Emily said, watching Rusty play with the 5 other horses now living on the property. "These local communities need someone who understands their realities. It's no use being famous worldwide if I'm not helping those closest to me. Aren't you curious to see other places?" "I am," Emily admitted, "but I find more satisfaction in seeing the real results of my work. Last week, a local ranch completely changed how they treat animals after our visit. That means more to me than any international award." One Sunday morning, 3 years after buying Rusty, Emily was in the pasture watching him train a new foal when she heard the gate open. It was an unfamiliar woman, accompanied by 2 children. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you Emily Parker?" "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "My name is Patricia Wilson. I saw the documentary about you and came all the way from New York City just to meet you." Emily was surprised. "From New York City? That's such a long trip. What can I do for you?" "Actually," said Patricia, tears in her eyes, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "Because you saved my life." Emily was confused. "I don't understand. We've never met before." "Not directly," Patricia explained, "but the report you filed at Hope Ranch saved far more than just horses." Patricia shared that she had worked at a farm neighboring Hope Ranch and had also been facing threats for wanting to report abuse. When she learned about Emily's report and saw that it had worked, she found the courage to do the same. "Because of your bravery, I found the strength to report my boss too," she said, "and it completely changed my life. I got a better job, was able to provide a decent life for my children, and now I work in animal protection in New York City." "I had no idea," Emily said, moved. "Well, you should know," Patricia replied. "Your actions created a wave of courage that reached far more people than you realize." The children asked to meet Rusty, and Emily took them to the pasture. The horse, always gentle with kids, approached slowly and let them pet him. "He's exactly like we imagined," said the youngest girl, "just like in the film." "He loves carrots," Emily said, handing some to the children to feed Rusty. "Can I ask you something?" said the boy, who looked about 10. "Of course. How did you know everything would turn out okay?" Emily smiled. "I didn't," she admitted. "In fact, at the time, I thought I'd ruined everything. I lost my job, my home, had to start over somewhere else." "Then how did you find the courage?" "Because sometimes you have to do the right thing, even when you don't know if it'll work out. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you are." "Was it worth it?" Emily looked around. Rusty grazing happily, the other rescued horses playing in the pasture, Margaret watering the garden flowers, Kevin arriving for Sunday lunch. "Yes," she said. "It was absolutely worth it." Patricia and the children spent the rest of the day at the farm. That afternoon, before leaving, Patricia handed Emily an envelope. "What's this?" "Signatures," Patricia said. 3,000 people from New York City who want to support your work, and there's a proposal from the city government for you to open a branch of your project there." Emily opened the envelope and saw page after page of signatures, along with an official letter from the New York City Department of Environmental Protection. "They want me to go back to New York City?" "Not necessarily. They want your project to grow. You could train others to use your methods in different regions." Emily sat on a tree stump, processing the idea. "It would be like multiplying what you do here," Patricia explained. "You'd still be based here, but have teams working with your methodology in multiple cities." "It's an interesting idea," Emily said, "but I'd need to think carefully about how to do it without losing the heart of the work." "Of course, there's no rush. We just wanted to plant the seed." That night, Emily discussed the proposal with Margaret and Kevin. "What do you think?" "I think it's a natural next step for your work," Kevin said. "You've already proven your methods work. Why not teach others to apply them?" "But I love the hands-on work," Emily protested. "I like knowing each animal, each situation." "You wouldn't lose that," Margaret said. "You'd just add a bigger layer of impact." "What about Rusty? Would he adjust to more frequent travel?" "Rusty adjusts to anything as long as he's with you," Kevin said. "We already proved that in Miami." Emily spent weeks thinking about the proposal. She visited New York City twice to learn more about the project and meet with local authorities. The offer was truly appealing. She would maintain her base in the countryside, but have a trained team working across several cities in the New York metropolitan area. "What convinces me," she told Margaret one evening, "is that I wouldn't be doing everything alone. I'd be teaching others to do what I do." "Like a school?" "Exactly. A school for animal protection focused on emotional connections between humans and animals." Emily accepted the proposal, but on her own terms. She wanted the training to take place at her farm so people could see the work in action. She also insisted that every new professional spend at least 1 month working directly with her before taking charge of their own region. The first group of trainees arrived 6 months later, 12 people of different ages and backgrounds, all passionate about animal protection. Emily designed an intensive 4-week program where they learned not only practical techniques, but also developed the emotional sensitivity needed for the work. "The first step," she told the group on day 1, "is understanding that we're not just saving animals, we're building bridges between suffering and healing for both the animals and the people involved." "How so?" asked one participant, a 35-year-old veterinarian named Sandra. "Often people who mistreat animals are suffering in some way themselves," Emily explained. "Our job isn't just to punish, but to educate and raise awareness." "And what if the person doesn't want to be educated?" "Then we use the law," Emily said firmly. "But we always try dialogue first. You'll be surprised how many situations can be resolved just with conversation and guidance." Over the 4 weeks of training, the participants shadowed Emily on real visits to farms, shelters, and rural properties. They saw how she handled delicate situations, identified signs of abuse, and built trust with resistant owners. The most impactful moment came in the 3rd week, during a visit to a small farm where there were reports of horse neglect. The owner, a 60-year-old man named Joseph, was initially hostile. "I have nothing to hide," he said, clearly defensive. "My horses are well cared for." Emily observed the animals silently for a few minutes. They were visibly underweight, with overgrown hooves and dull coats. "Mr. Joseph," she said gently, "may I ask how long you've been raising horses?" 40 years, he replied, still guarded. "Then you love these animals?" The question caught him off guard. "Of course I do. I've dedicated my life to them." "I see that," Emily said. "And I also see that maybe you're struggling to care for them properly." Joseph looked down. "Times have been hard," he admitted. "I don't even have money for proper feed." "Why didn't you seek help?" "Pride," he said simply. "And fear they'd take my horses away." Emily spent the next hour discussing options with Joseph, government aid programs, organizations that could provide free feed and veterinary care. By the end of the visit, instead of filing a report, she had created a recovery plan for the farm. "Did you see?" she asked the trainees afterward. At first glance, it seemed Joseph was mistreating the horses out of cruelty, but in reality, it was due to lack of resources and wounded pride. "And if he hadn't cooperated?" Sandra asked. "Then it would have been different," Emily admitted. "But it's always worth trying to understand first. You'll discover that most situations have deeper roots than they appear." By the end of the 4 weeks, all 12 participants were certified to work with Emily's method. They spread out across different regions of New York City, keeping in regular contact and meeting monthly to share experiences. 6 months after the first class graduated, Emily received a report that made her proud. The 12 regions covered by her former students had seen a 40% reduction in animal cruelty complaints, not because cases had decreased, but because they were being resolved through education and support before reaching the level of formal complaints. "You've created something revolutionary," Patricia said during one of her visits. "A preventive approach instead of just a punitive one." "It wasn't just me," Emily replied. "It was the whole team. And most of all, it was Rusty who taught me that true connections can heal any wound." Emily looked at Rusty, now a majestic adult horse, standing in the pasture with the other rescued horses. Some of the trainees had brought special cases to the farm, and he had become a sort of mentor for traumatized horses. "He never lost that ability to care for others," Kevin observed. "Because he never forgot what it's like to need care," Emily said. One Friday afternoon, 5 years after buying Rusty, Emily received a call that moved her deeply. "Emily Parker?" a young, excited voice said. "Yes, speaking. This is Gabriella Mitchell. You might not remember me, but I was in the group of children who visited your farm 3 years ago." "Of course I remember you," Emily said, genuinely recalling the girl. "How are you?" "Great, and with some news. I just got accepted into veterinary school. I want to specialize in animal protection, inspired by you." Emily felt tears in her eyes. "That's wonderful news, Gabriella." "And there's more," the girl continued. "I convinced my parents to adopt a rescued horse. His name is Thunder, and he has a story similar to Rusty's." "How so?" "He lost his mother when he was young and was very aggressive with everyone. But when I approached him the way you taught me, with patience and kindness, he calmed down." "And now?" "Now we're inseparable." Gabriella laughed. "My parents joke that we have a telepathic connection." After hanging up, Emily sat thinking about the conversation. A child who had visited her farm 3 years ago was now following the same path of animal protection. It was proof that her actions were truly creating a cycle of care and protection that kept growing. "What happened?" Margaret asked, noticing her niece's emotional expression. Emily told her about Gabriella's call. "You planted a seed in that girl," her aunt said, "and now you're seeing the tree grow." "It's amazing to think it all started with a complaint I made on impulse," Emily reflected. "It wasn't impulse," Margaret corrected. "It was your heart. And the heart is never wrong when it comes to protecting those who can't protect themselves." That night, Emily went to the pasture to say goodnight to Rusty, as she had done every night for 5 years. But this time, she brought a surprise, a special carrot she had bought in town. "Hi, my love," she said, holding out the carrot. "Today's a special day." Rusty approached and took the carrot gently, chewing with delight. "Do you know why?" she continued, running her hand along his neck. "Because today I realized our story has no end. Every person we help, every animal we save, every child we inspire, it all keeps creating more stories of love and protection." Rusty tilted his head to the side, as he always did when she spoke to him. "You taught me that true love isn't about owning someone," she said. "It's about being the best version of yourself so that person can be happy." The horse pressed its muzzle against her cheek, the affectionate gesture that had become their trademark. "Thank you for finding me that day," whispered Emily. "Thank you for teaching me that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as small problems we need to solve." The following Saturday, Emily woke to a strange noise coming from the pasture. When she looked out the window, she saw Rusty running back and forth, clearly agitated. She rushed outside and found a sight that took her breath away. An unfamiliar mare stood in the pasture with a newborn foal beside her. Both looked visibly exhausted and frightened. "How did they get in here?" asked Margaret, who had woken up to the commotion. Emily checked the fence and found an opening that hadn't been there the night before. "Someone put them here during the night," she said. "Who would do that?" "Someone who knew they'd be safe here." Emily slowly approached the mare, who shied away in fear, but Rusty stepped between them, whinnying softly, as if introducing Emily to the newcomer. "It's okay," Emily said gently. "You're safe here." The mare watched Emily for a long moment, then looked at Rusty, who remained calm and steady. Gradually, she allowed Emily to come closer. "She's hurt," Emily observed, noticing cuts on the mare's legs, "and the foal is weak." "I'll call Kevin," said Margaret. While they waited for the vet, Emily stayed in the pasture with the new arrivals. Rusty had taken on a protective stance, staying close to the mare and foal as if they were his responsibility. "You know how to take care of others, don't you?" Emily said to him. "You've learned well." Kevin arrived half an hour later and examined both animals. "They're malnourished, but nothing that can't be treated," he said. "The mare has some superficial cuts, and the foal needs supplemental feeding, but they'll be fine." "Any idea where they came from?" Emily asked. "I'll check for reports of missing animals," Kevin replied. "But given their condition, I suspect someone rescued them from a bad situation and brought them here because they knew you'd take care of them." "How did they know where I live?" "Emily," Kevin said with a smile, "you're famous around here. Everyone knows where the woman who saved Rusty lives." Over the next few days, Emily cared for the mare and foal with Rusty's help, who proved to be an excellent assistant. He brought them water, stayed nearby during feedings, and even helped guide the foal during its first steps in the pasture. "I've never seen anything like it," Kevin remarked during one of his visits. "Rusty's acting like an adoptive father." "He knows what it's like to be orphaned," Emily said. "He doesn't want anyone else to go through that." A week later, Emily discovered who had left the animals on her farm. It was a worker from a neighboring ranch who had witnessed abuse, but was afraid to report it directly. "I knew you'd take care of them," the man said when he finally came forward. "And I knew you'd find a way to handle the situation without putting anyone at risk. Why didn't you seek official help?" "Because the ranch owner has a lot of influence around here. I could have lost not just my job, but also faced retaliation." Emily understood the man's dilemma. Not every situation could be resolved the same way, and sometimes indirect action was necessary to protect both the animals and the people involved. "What do we do now?" he asked. "We'll do what I always do," Emily said. "We'll try to solve it through dialogue first." Emily discreetly investigated the farm where the animals had come from and discovered that the owner was going through a severe financial crisis, which explained the neglect toward the animals. Instead of filing a formal complaint, she introduced herself as someone interested in buying horses. "I heard you have a mare with a foal for sale," she said during the visit. "I do," replied the farmer, clearly desperate for money. "What's your interest?" "I work with animal-assisted therapy," Emily explained. "I'm looking for gentle horses for the program." "I can show you a few," he offered. During the visit, Emily quickly saw that the entire farm was in poor condition. There were dozens of visibly neglected horses, pastures with no grass and dirty water in the troughs. "Are you going through some difficulties?" she asked gently. The man let his guard down. "Plenty," he admitted. "The drought over the last 2 years ruined my production. I don't even have money for proper feed. Have you looked into government assistance programs? I tried, but there's too much red tape, and meanwhile, the animals suffer." Emily spent the next 2 hours helping the farmer fill out forms for rural assistance programs and connecting him with organizations that could provide emergency feed. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, clearly moved. "You don't even know me." "Because I understand that sometimes people do bad things not out of malice, but out of desperation," Emily said, "and I believe everyone deserves a second chance." 3 months later, the farm was unrecognizable. With the help of assistance programs and technical guidance, the owner had not only improved the animal's conditions, but also diversified his production in a more sustainable way. "Emily," he said during a follow-up visit, "you didn't just save my horses, you saved my entire family." "You're the one who saved them," she corrected. "I just showed you the way. You were the one who walked it." "And what about the mare and foal that disappeared?" "Oh, they turned up," Emily said, trying to keep a neutral expression. "They're well cared for now." The farmer smiled, and Emily had the impression he knew exactly where the animals were. "That's good," he said simply. "They deserve a good life." 6 years after buying Rusty, Emily had become a reference in animal protection across the state. Her method of intervention through dialogue and support had spread to over 50 cities, always focusing on solving problems rather than just punishing. On a Tuesday afternoon, she was in her makeshift home office when she received a call that would change her perspective on everything she had built. "Emily Parker," said a mature woman's voice. "Yes, speaking." "This is Dr. Helen Carter, Director of the National Institute for Animal Protection. We'd like to speak with you about a very special proposal." Emily was surprised. The National Institute was the largest animal protection organization in the country. "What kind of proposal?" "We'd like to invite you to be our national consultant for developing public policies on animal protection." "National?" Emily felt a flutter in her stomach. "Yes. Your preventive intervention method has caught the attention of the federal government. We want to implement this approach on a national scale." "Doctor, I appreciate the invitation, but my work is local. I don't have experience with national policies." "That's exactly why we want you," Dr. Helen said. "We need someone who understands practical realities, not just academic theory." Emily asked for time to think about the proposal. It was an incredible opportunity, but it would also mean a radical change in her life. "What do you think?" she asked Margaret during dinner. "I think it's a decision only you can make," her aunt replied. "But can I ask you a question?" "Of course. Do you see yourself happy working in an office in Washington, D.C., far from Rusty and all this hands-on work you love?" The question was straight to the point. Emily knew the answer immediately. "No," she said. "I can't see myself happy away from here." "Then you already have your answer." The next day, Emily called Dr. Helen with a counter-proposal. "Doctor, I'm deeply grateful for the invitation, but I can't accept the position in Washington, D.C." "I understand it's a shame because—" "Let me finish," Emily interrupted. "I can't go to Washington, D.C., but I can offer something better." "What would that be?" "Turning my farm into a national training center. Bring public managers from all over the country to learn the method here hands-on and then implement it in their regions." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Go on," Dr. Helen finally said. "It would be like a university for animal protection. We'd have real cases, rescued animals, practical situations for managers to learn from the source, and I'd keep doing what I do best, direct work." "That's an interesting proposal," Dr. Helen admitted. "You'd need much larger infrastructure. That can be built. What can't be built is hands-on experience and real connection with the cases." The negotiation took 3 months, but they finally reached an agreement. The federal government would invest in expanding Emily's farm, turning it into a national center for excellence in animal protection. Public managers from across the country would come for intensive 2-week courses where they'd learn not just theory, but live through hands-on experiences of rescue, rehabilitation, and mediation. Construction began in the fall. Emily insisted the new buildings be designed to blend harmoniously with the existing landscape without disturbing the pastures where Rusty and the other horses lived. "This place needs to stay a home," she told the architect. "It can't just become an institution." "I understand completely," the architect said. "We'll create functional spaces that respect the soul of this place." During construction, Emily continued her usual work. Rusty seemed fascinated by all the activity, watching the workers and occasionally supervising the progress. "He thinks he's the project manager," Kevin joked. "Maybe he is," Emily laughed. "This place is his too." The National Center for Excellence in Animal Protection opened in a simple but moving ceremony. Officials from various states, veterinarians, activists, and of course, the first group of public managers for the pilot program were all present. "Welcome to our home," Emily said in her opening speech. "You're not just visiting a training center, you're joining a family of people and animals who believe love and respect can transform any situation." The first group consisted of 20 managers from different states. For 2 weeks, they shadowed Emily on real visits, participated in rescues, learned to mediate conflicts between owners and neighbors, and developed the sensitivity needed for the work. "The most important thing," Emily said on the last day of the course, "isn't memorizing laws or procedures. It's understanding that behind every complaint is a complex human story. Our job is to uncover that story and work with it, not against it." "And when the person really doesn't want to cooperate?" one participant asked. "Then you enforce the law strictly," Emily said firmly. "But always give dialogue a chance first. You'll be surprised how many situations can be resolved that way." At the end of the course, the 20 managers returned to their regions with a detailed plan to implement Emily's method. 6 months later, reports from across the country showed a significant reduction in the number of animal abuse cases reaching the judicial level because they were being resolved preventively. "You've created a quiet revolution," said Dr. Helen during a visit to the center. "A revolution built on compassion instead of punishment." "It wasn't us," said Emily, looking at Rusty, who was grazing near the administrative building. "It was him who taught me that true connections can solve any problem." One Sunday morning, 7 years after buying Rusty, Emily was walking through the pasture when she noticed something different. Rusty was standing in front of a specific tree, an old mango tree that had always been special to them. She approached and saw that he had left something at the base of the tree. It was a small wildflower he had picked and placed there. "What's this, my love?" she asked, crouching to pick up the flower. Rusty nuzzled her hand and then looked up at the tree. Emily followed his gaze and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Small marks on the trunk, as if someone had scratched words into the bark. Looking closer, she could make out the old markings. "Star plus eternal love." "My God," she whispered. "Your mother was here before." Emily searched the records and discovered that Star had spent a few months on that property during her recovery before being taken to Richard's farm. Someone had planted that mango tree in her honor. "You knew, didn't you?" she said to Rusty. "Somehow you knew this place was special for your mother." That afternoon, Emily organized a small ceremony in Star's memory. She planted roses around the mango tree and placed a simple plaque. "In memory of Star, a loving mother who taught us that love transcends even departure." Rusty stood beside her throughout the ceremony, quiet and respectful, as if he understood the significance of the moment. "Your mother would be proud to see the horse you've become," Emily said, stroking his neck, "and to know her love lives on through you." That night, for the first time in years, Rusty didn't come to the fence when Emily went to say goodbye. He stayed under the mango tree, keeping silent watch. Emily understood he needed that moment. The next morning, she found Rusty playing normally with the other horses, but there was something different in his demeanor, a peace she had never seen before, as if a deep part of his soul had finally found rest. "He's made peace with the past," Kevin observed during his weekly visit. "We all need to do that at some point," Emily said. "Rusty just found the right place and time." 8 years after buying Rusty, the National Center for Excellence in Animal Protection had trained over 300 public officials from every state in the country. Emily's methodology had become a national standard, and cases of animal abuse had drastically decreased in all regions where the program was implemented. On a rainy winter afternoon, Emily was in her office finishing reports when she received a special call. "Emily?" said a voice she hadn't heard in a long time. "Dr. Mitchell." Emily immediately recognized the voice of the man who had almost bought Rusty years ago. "That's right. I know it might be strange for me to call after so long." "It's not strange," Emily said kindly. "How can I help you?" "Actually, I'd like to visit you. I have something important to discuss." "Of course, when would be convenient?" "If possible, tomorrow. It's urgent." Emily was curious but agreed to the meeting. The next day, Dr. Mitchell arrived at the center driving a modest car, a far cry from the extravagance she remembered from years past. "Emily," he said, approaching with a humble smile, "thank you for seeing me." "Of course. Please have a seat. What can I do for you?" Dr. Mitchell hesitated for a moment before speaking. "First, I want to apologize for how I treated you 8 years ago. I was completely wrong." "Dr. Mitchell, that's in the past. Let me finish," he said. "You need to hear this. After I lost the chance to buy Rusty, my business started falling apart. The horses I bought couldn't adapt to the harsh methods I used. I lost a lot of money and nearly went bankrupt." Emily listened in silence. "It was then that I began following your story," he continued. "I read about your methods, watched the documentaries, saw the success of your center, and I realized I was completely wrong about how to treat animals. What brings you here today?" "I want to learn," he said simply. "I want to join your training program." Emily was surprised. "The program is designed for public officials." "I know, but perhaps you can make an exception. I'm willing to pay whatever it takes. I need to learn how to do things the right way." Emily looked out the window and saw Rusty grazing peacefully with the other horses. "Dr. Mitchell, money isn't the most important thing here. What matters is your motivation. Why do you really want to learn?" "Because I want to make up for years of mistreating the animals under my care," he said, tears in his eyes. "And because I want to teach other breeders to do better than I did." Emily sensed his sincerity was genuine. "All right," she said, "but there's one condition." "What is it?" "You'll start from scratch, like any beginner. No privileges or special treatment, and you'll work directly with the most difficult cases. I accept all your conditions." Dr. Mitchell spent the next 2 weeks at the center, fully immersed in the program. Emily watched him gradually transform, abandoning authoritarian methods in favor of approaches based on trust and respect. The most moving moment came on the last day, when Emily took him to meet Rusty in person. "This is the horse you almost bought 8 years ago," she said. Dr. Mitchell approached Rusty slowly, and the horse studied him with curiosity. "Hey boy," he said softly, "I'm sorry I didn't understand your importance back then." To everyone's surprise, Rusty stepped forward and allowed Dr. Mitchell to stroke him. "He forgives you," Emily said, touched. "Animals are better than humans in that way," Dr. Mitchell replied. "They don't hold grudges." By the end of the training, Dr. Mitchell returned to his region with an ambitious plan to turn his property into a regional training center, applying Emily's methods in his area of influence. "I want to make up for the harm I've done," he said during their farewell, "and I want other breeders to learn the right way from the start." A year later, Dr. Mitchell had established the first regional center affiliated with Emily's program. His personal transformation became an inspiration for other breeders in the area, proving it's never too late to change and do better. "Did you see?" Emily said to her team during a meeting. "Even our old adversaries can become our greatest allies when we understand their true motivations." "How did you know you could trust him?" asked Sandra, one of the team's veterinarians. "Because Rusty trusted him," Emily said simply, "and I've learned to trust his judgment about people." On a spring afternoon, 9 years after buying Rusty, Emily was organizing papers in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Emily, there's a family here who'd like to speak with you. They say it's about an urgent situation. Of course, send them in." A woman around 40 years old entered, accompanied by 2 teenage children. They all looked very emotional. "Mrs. Emily," the woman said, tears in her eyes, "my name is Teresa Wilson. I came from very far away to meet you." "Where are you from?" "Montana," said one of the boys. "We traveled 3 days by bus." Emily was impressed. "Montana? My, what a long trip. What can I do for you?" "It's about my husband," Teresa said. He passed 2 years ago, leaving us with a small ranch full of debts and 20 horses to care for." "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you. The problem is I knew nothing about caring for horses. I did everything wrong at first. Some got sick, others ran away. It was chaos." "And how did you find me?" "Through Dr. Mitchell," said the other son. He went to Montana to give a talk and told us your story. He said you could help us. Emily smiled, happy to hear Dr. Mitchell was truly spreading the word about their work. But you came all this way just to talk. You could have called... Actually, Teresa hesitated, I brought 2 horses with me. They're very sick and no vet in our area could figure out what's wrong. Dr. Mitchell said Kevin here is the best vet he knows. Where are the horses? In the trailer outside. We took the trip slow, stopping every 2 hours so they could rest. Emily called Kevin immediately. When they went to see the horses in the trailer, they found 2 animals in terrible condition, malnourished with dull coats and clearly depressed. How long have they been like this? Kevin asked. About 6 months, Teresa said. It started after some horses from the neighboring ranch died of an illness no one could identify. Kevin examined the animals carefully. It doesn't look like an illness, he finally said. It looks like deep emotional trauma. What do you mean? Horses can develop severe depression when they lose close companions or witness traumatic situations, Kevin explained. It's like they've lost the will to live. Is there a cure? There is, but it takes a lot of time and patience, Emily said, and most of all, love and a new reason to live. Teresa began to cry. I can't stay here. I have 18 other horses to care for back in Montana. You don't have to stay, Emily said gently. Leave them here with me. We'll take care of them until they're well, and then we'll talk about the future. I don't have money to pay. Who said anything about money? Emily interrupted. Our work is exactly this, helping animals and people in need. Teresa and her children stayed at the center for 3 days, learning basic horse care techniques and receiving guidance on how to handle the other animals back in Montana. You don't need to be experts, Emily said. You just need to be loving and observant. If there's any problem, call us. The 2 horses from Montana stayed in the recovery pasture under special care. Emily noticed Rusty showed immediate interest in them, spending long hours near the fence separating the pastures. He wants to help, Kevin observed. Let him then, Emily decided. Maybe he's exactly what they need. When Rusty was placed in the same pasture as the depressed horses, the change was gradual but remarkable. He positioned himself as a gentle protector, bringing them close at mealtime, standing by them during storms, and playing softly to encourage them to move. He's being a therapist, Emily told Kevin, teaching them how to live again. Where do you think he learned that? From all of us, Emily said. From our family, our home, our love, he's passing on what he received. 2 months later, the horses from Montana were fully recovered. They had gained weight, their coats were shiny again, and they played actively with Rusty and the others. Teresa came back to pick them up, but when she saw the transformation, she made a surprising decision. Emily, she said, can I make a proposal? Of course. What if I brought all my horses here? I could sell the ranch in Montana and move closer, work with you all. Are you sure? It's a big change. I'm sure, Teresa said firmly. In Montana, I'm just surviving. Here, I can make a difference in the lives of other animals. What about your children? They love the idea, said the oldest. We want to help with your work. Emily discussed the proposal with her team. Everyone agreed it would be beneficial to have another experienced horse person, especially someone who had faced the very struggles they aimed to solve. Welcome to the family, Emily told Teresa during the hiring ceremony. Thank you for giving us this chance, Teresa replied, emotional. 3 months later, Teresa had moved permanently with her children and all her horses. The center had grown significantly, but kept the same warm, family-like atmosphere that had always defined Emily's work. You've brought new energy here, Margaret told Teresa during a Sunday lunch. Actually, you're the ones who gave us a new life, Teresa corrected. For the first time since my husband passed, I feel like we have a purpose. On a quiet afternoon, 10 years after buying Rusty, Emily was sitting under Star's mango tree when Kevin approached with a serious expression. Emily, I need to talk to you about something important. What is it? She asked, noticing his grave tone. It's about Rusty. I've noticed some behavioral changes in him lately. Emily's heart raced. What kind of changes? Nothing medically concerning, Kevin quickly clarified, but he's different, more contemplative. more independent. Explain. Well, have you noticed he doesn't come to the fence every night when you say goodbye anymore? It was true. Over the past few months, Rusty had started spending more time in the middle of the pasture, sometimes alone, sometimes watching the other horses from a distance. I thought it was just a phase. It might be, Kevin said, but it could also mean he's preparing for something. For what? To be more independent. Emily, Rusty is 10 now, he's a grown, mature horse. Maybe he feels his mission, to heal and be healed, is complete. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. Are you saying he doesn't need me anymore? I'm not saying that, Kevin said gently. I'm saying your relationship might be evolving, from mutual dependence to a mature partnership. That night, Emily went to the pasture as she always did, but this time she paid attention to the details she'd overlooked in recent months. Rusty was lying calmly in the middle of the field, watching the stars. She walked over slowly and sat beside him in the grass. Rusty lifted his head and looked at her, but didn't get up for affection as he used to. Hi, my love, she said softly. Kevin says you're changing. Rusty watched her with those wise eyes she knew so well. You're growing up, aren't you? She continued. You're not that scared foal who followed me everywhere anymore. Rusty nuzzled her hand, but the gesture was different. Not needy or dependent, but mature and serene. It's okay, Emily said, tears in her eyes. I'm proud of the horse you've become, and if you need more space to be who you are, I understand. They stayed there for an hour, in companionable silence, watching the stars together. When Emily got up to leave, Rusty remained lying down, calm and trusting. Good night, she said. I'll be here if you need me. In the weeks that followed, Emily watched Rusty's transformation with a mix of pride and melancholy. He had become the natural leader of the herd, protecting the younger horses, mediating conflicts, and teaching proper behaviors to the newcomers. He's become what you are to humans, observed Teresa. A caretaker, a protector, a teacher. Yes, Emily agreed. He learned the lesson it took me years to understand. Sometimes loving someone means giving them space to grow. A year later, the dynamic between Emily and Rusty had settled into a new pattern. They still had special moments together, but the intense dependence of the early years had given way to a respectful, mature partnership. Emily grew accustomed to seeing him work with other horses, always patient, always gentle, always protecting the most vulnerable. It was like seeing a reflection of what she tried to do with people. You two have created a cycle of care that keeps going, said Dr. Mitchell during one of his visits. Rusty is multiplying what he learned from you. It's the greatest gift he could give me, Emily said, to see that the love he received has turned into love he gives to others. One Sunday morning, Emily woke earlier than usual and decided to check on the horses before breakfast. When she reached the pasture, she found a scene that moved her deeply. Rusty was with a newly arrived foal, a 3-month-old orphan brought in the week before. The foal was clearly frightened and reluctant to eat, but Rusty had positioned himself beside him, offering protection and encouragement. Just like you used to do with me, Emily murmured, watching from a distance. When Rusty saw her, he lifted his head and gazed at her for a long moment. There was something in that look Emily couldn't immediately decipher. It was only when she approached that she understood. Rusty was introducing her to the foal as if to say, "This is Emily. She'll take care of you too." "Hi there, little one," Emily said softly to the foal who hid behind Rusty. Rusty gave a quiet whinny and took a few steps aside, encouraging the foal to approach Emily. It was exactly what she did with shy people during her talks. "You're teaching me how to work with him, aren't you?" she said to Rusty, who tilted his head as he always did when she spoke to him. Over the following days, Emily worked with the orphaned foal, following Rusty's behavioral cues. The horse had become her co-therapist, indicating when to push and when to step back, when to offer affection and when to give space. "I've never seen anything like it," Kevin remarked. "Rusty is literally training you to work with this foal." "He knows things I'm still learning," Emily admitted, "about patience, about timing, about reading the emotional needs of another being." The orphaned foal recovered completely in 2 weeks, a record time compared to similar cases. And throughout the process, Rusty remained as mentor and protector, building an emotional bridge between Emily and the frightened animal. "He's developed his own therapeutic skill," Teresa observed. "It's like he's an equine psychologist." "Maybe we should officially include this in our program," Sandra suggested. Horse-assisted therapy with therapy horses. Emily liked the idea. In the months that followed, she developed a protocol where Rusty actively worked as a co-therapist in specific cases of traumatized or orphaned horses. The results were extraordinary. Horses that used to take months to recover from trauma were now healing in just weeks, with Rusty providing exactly the kind of emotional support they needed. One autumn afternoon, 11 years after buying Rusty, Emily received a call that left her completely speechless. "Emily Parker," said a young woman's voice. "Yes, that's me. This is Amanda Thompson, daughter of Richard Thompson." Emily's heart raced. It was her former boss's daughter, the owner of Oak Ridge Farm, where it had all begun. "Amanda, how are you? And your father?" "My father? Well, actually, that's why I'm calling," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "He's very sick, Emily. The doctors say he doesn't have much time." "I'm so sorry to hear that," Emily said sincerely, despite their complicated history. "He asked to speak with you, said he needs to make things right before he goes." Emily hesitated. Memories of the farm were still painful in some ways. "Amanda, I don't know if—" "Please," the young woman interrupted. "He's deeply sorry for how he treated you. He talks about it every day. It would mean so much to him." Emily looked out the window and saw Rusty in the pasture, now a majestic, serene horse, the respected leader of the herd. "All right," she finally said. "When would be best?" "Today, if possible. He's at the city hospital." Emily arrived at the hospital late that afternoon, accompanied by Kevin, who had insisted on coming for moral support. They found Richard in a simple room, visibly frail but with alert eyes. "Emily," he said, trying to sit up. "Thank you for coming. How are you feeling, Mr. Thompson?" "Physically terrible," he said with a weak smile. "But emotionally? Well, that depends on what you say after I speak my piece." "I'm listening." Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "Emily, I made a terrible mistake with you. Not just firing you, but failing to see your worth from the start. Mr. Thompson, that's in the past. Please, let me finish," he said. "After you left, the farm was never the same. Rusty was depressed for months. Other horses started showing behavioral problems, and I realized you weren't just an employee. You were the heart of Oak Ridge." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "But the worst part," Richard continued, "was learning the full truth about Rusty and Star years later. When I found out you'd saved his mother, I knew I'd fired the most important person on that farm. You couldn't have known." "Yes, I could," he said firmly. "I could have investigated better, listened to you, trusted what I saw, instead of people like Dr. Mitchell." "Dr. Mitchell has changed a lot," Emily said. "He works with us now." "I know," Richard said, smiling. "He told me, and he told me everything you've built. Emily, you've become exactly what I should have seen in you all along. A leader, a visionary, someone who can change the world." Tears now streamed freely down Emily's face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to leave in peace," Richard said, "and because I have an offer for you." "What kind of offer?" "I want to leave Oak Ridge Farm to you." Emily nearly fell out of her chair. "What?" "The farm is yours in my will," Richard said calmly. "It's the least I can do to make up for my mistake." "Mr. Thompson, I can't accept this. What about your daughter?" "Amanda fully agrees," he said. "She always knew you deserved more than you got." Amanda, who had stayed quiet until then, stepped forward. "Emily, my father's right. You've transformed your life and hundreds of others since leaving the farm. It's only fair that it should go to the place where it all began." Emily looked at Kevin, who was clearly emotional about the situation. I need to think about this." "You don't have to decide now," said Richard. But I want you to know that no matter what you choose, you've already forgiven me by becoming the extraordinary person you are today." "I forgive you," said Emily, taking his hand, "and I thank you for giving me the chance to start over, even if it wasn't intentional." "You always had that chance," said Richard. "I was just too foolish to see it." Emily spent an hour talking with Richard about the old days, about Rusty, about all the changes that had happened. When she finally said goodbye, she knew it was likely the last time she'd see him. "Take good care of the farm," he said, "and most of all, take care of the legacy you and Rusty built." Richard passed away 3 days later, at peace, knowing he had made amends with his greatest regret. The funeral was small, but Emily made sure to be there. During the ceremony, she looked out at Oak Ridge Farm in the distance and felt a strange mix of emotions. "Are you going to accept the inheritance?" Kevin asked. "I think so," said Emily, "but not for me. To expand the work we do." In the weeks that followed, Emily visited Oak Ridge Farm several times, planning how to integrate the property into the National Center for Excellence. The farm would become an extension campus, specifically focused on rehabilitation programs for severely traumatized horses. "It's perfect," Teresa said during one visit. "Rusty can be the lead mentor for the horses that come here. Do you think he'll want to return to the place where he was born?" "There's only one way to find out," Kevin replied. The following Saturday, Emily took Rusty to visit Oak Ridge Farm. She was nervous about how he'd react to returning to the site of his traumatic orphan childhood. When the trailer stopped at the farm's entrance, Rusty grew alert, clearly recognizing the place. Emily led him out slowly, watching his every reaction. Rusty looked around for a long moment, then walked straight to the stable where he'd been born. Emily followed, amazed by his memory. "You remember everything, don't you?" she murmured. Rusty stopped in front of the stall that had once been his mother's. It was empty, but he stood there for several minutes as if paying his respects. Then, to Emily's surprise, he walked to the spot where she used to work as a cleaner. It was where they'd first met, where he'd begun following her tirelessly. "This is where it all started," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "Where a scared foal chased after a lonely cleaner until they both found what they needed." Rusty turned to her and did something he hadn't done in years. He nuzzled her cheek, just as he had when he was young. But this time it wasn't neediness or dependence. It was gratitude. "Do you want to come back here?" she asked. "Do you want to help other horses in this place where it all began for us?" Rusty whinnied softly and began exploring the rest of the property, as if assessing the possibilities. Emily understood that as a yes. 3 months later, Oak Ridge Farm had been completely renovated and transformed into the advanced rehabilitation campus of the National Center for Excellence in Animal Protection. Rusty had moved there, officially taking on the role of lead therapy horse. "It's like he's come home," Amanda observed during the opening ceremony. "But this time as the master of the place, not as a frightened orphan." "We all come home when we find our purpose," Emily said. The first group of traumatized horses arrived a week later. There were 5 animals rescued from extreme cases of neglect and abuse, situations considered nearly hopeless by the veterinarians overseeing them. Rusty welcomed them with the wisdom of someone who intimately understood suffering and healing. One by one, he approached each frightened animal, offering protection, companionship, and the kind of understanding only someone who had endured the same pain could provide. "It's incredible," said Dr. Mitchell, who had come to observe the work. "He's literally teaching these horses to trust again." "Because he learned it's possible to trust again," said Emily, "and now he's passing that lesson on." On a winter afternoon, 12 years after buying Rusty, Emily was in the office of the renovated farm when she received an unexpected visit. It was Jack, the oldest ranch hand from the original farm, now retired. "Jack, what a wonderful surprise," she said, hugging the 70-year-old man. "I came to see how things are going here," he said, looking around in admiration. "It doesn't even look like the same place." "Want to take a walk? See Rusty?" "I'd love to." As they strolled through the pasture, Jack shared stories of the old days, how the farm used to be, how Rusty had been a special colt from birth. "You know," he said as they approached Rusty, who was working with one of the rehabilitating horses, "I always knew that colt was different." "Why?"
His eyes, Jack said. Even as a foal, he had eyes that understood things other horses didn't.
Eyes of someone who had known pain but also love. Emily watched Rusty gently guide a young, traumatized horse toward the feeding trough. His patience was endless, his affection genuine. "Jack," she said suddenly, "can I ask you something I've always wondered?" "Of course." "Do you think Rusty kept following me in those early days because he recognized something in me? Or was it just the need of an orphan?" Jack was silent for a moment, watching Rusty. "I think it was both," he finally said. "He was an orphan and needed someone. But I also think he sensed you understood his pain because you had your own. And now you've both healed each other and are healing others," Jack said, smiling. "It's the perfect circle of life." That night, Emily took her usual evening walk through the pasture, a tradition she'd kept for 12 years. Rusty, as always, waited for her somewhere in the field. Though no longer with the desperate urgency of those early days, she found him near the spot where a memorial garden for Star would soon be planted. He lay quietly, gazing at the stars. "Hi, my love," she said, sitting beside him in the grass. Rusty lifted his head and looked at her with those wise eyes she now knew better than her own. 12 years, she murmured, running her hand along his neck. 12 years since you started following me all over the farm." Rusty nuzzled her hand, a gesture that had evolved from desperate need into deep, serene affection. "You know I finally understand why you kept following me, don't you?" she continued. "It wasn't just because I reminded you of your mother or because you were alone." Rusty watched her intently, as he always did when she spoke seriously to him. "It was because you somehow knew that together we could create something greater than the sum of our parts. You weren't just following a person, you were following a destiny." Emily looked around the transformed farm, where traumatized horses found healing, where people learned to love and protect animals, where stories of pain became stories of hope. "And look what we've built," she said, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Look at all the lives we've changed, all the hearts we've healed." Rusty stood up, and for the first time in years, pressed his forehead against hers, just as he used to do when he was little and needed comfort. But now it was him offering comfort to her, thanking her for the entire journey they had shared. "Thank you," whispered Emily. "Thank you for chasing me that day. Thank you for not giving up on me when I wanted to give up on you. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as problems we need to solve." They stayed there for an hour, in companionable silence. Two souls who had found each other at the exact moment they needed one another most, and who now, together, continued finding and saving other lost souls. When Emily finally stood up to go to sleep, Rusty remained in the pasture, no longer an abandoned animal waiting for someone, but a serene guardian protecting all those who now called that place home. "Good night, my love," she said. "See you tomorrow." Rusty let out a soft whinny, a sound that no longer expressed desperation or need, but deep contentment and unconditional love. As she walked back to the house, Emily glanced back one last time and saw Rusty in the middle of the pasture, majestic under the moonlight, surrounded by the horses he had helped heal. He was no longer the desperate orphaned foal who had chased her. He was a mentor, a healer, a living symbol that true love can turn any trauma into strength to help others. And Emily finally understood completely why he had chased her for hours that first day, 12 years ago. It wasn't just because he needed her. It was because they were destined to create a legacy of love, healing, and protection together, one that would last far beyond their own lives. The lonely little cleaner and the orphaned foal had become a family, and from that family, a mission had been born, one that now spread across the country, touching thousands of lives and proving that sometimes the most unlikely connections can bear the most extraordinary fruit. End of story. Now, tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a heartfelt comment below. Do you think Emily made the right choice in not giving up on Rusty when everyone said it was just stubbornness? We'd love to hear your thoughts on how love and persistence can transform lives. Thank you so much for joining us on this emotional journey. Don't forget to like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories.